Welcome to San Diego Integral, January 10th, 2026. Our topic today, the timeless story, cross-paradigmatic universals and the evolution of meaning. Presented by Nish, Dubashia, and Murtagh.
Welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Tom Habib, and I'm a member of the San Diego Integral's leadership team. Our guest speaker today is Nish Dubashia and Murtagh, coming in from both Europe and Central America. And the presentation is the timeless story, cross-paradigmatic universals and the evolution of meaning. And I think you understand why we open different paradigms, meaning tends to evolve. We will begin today's presentation shortly, but we first have a few announcements. The formal presentation portion of today's meeting will go for 2 hours until 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. After the formal presentation, we keep the room open for another 30 to 60 minutes for social time, for explorations, how the different issues affected you personally, sharing questions. It's all an informal discussion at that point. So you can stay connected to San Diego Integral on Meetup or our Facebook page. If you join one of these groups, you'll automatically be notified when a new event is added. You can also contact the leadership team. They'll meet up through Meetup or Facebook, even if you have comments or questions that you want to ask us. There's more information about San Diego Integral on our website at sandiegointegral.org. Finally, we invite you to make a small donation for today to help cover our fees and web hosting, and you can do that at sandiegointegral.org. Okay, so without further ado, Eloy is going to introduce our speakers today. So I'll leave it to you, Eloy.
Okay, I want to welcome Nish and Marie. Nish Dubashia is a British author, philosopher, and integral thinker known for his work on the diamond model and a framework that integrates Bohmian, the work of David Bohm, physics, integral theory, and Eastern philosophy. His original training was in mathematics, includes study at the University of Warwick, and his path includes formative connections with, I just mentioned him, the physicist David Bohm, whose work deeply influenced his thinking. Nish has shared his work at places like the Science and Consciousness Conference, World Unity Week, and MIT's Global Forum. He's the author of several books, including Gifted, Dancing with Angels, The Unity of Everything, and A Brief History of God. And he's the co-founder of Evolving Nexus and supporting personal and collective transformation. And Marie Murtagh is a spiritual facilitator and coach who works at the intersection of integral transformation and consciousness facilitation. She has a background in complexity and developmental psychology. Maria brings a grounded, heart-centered approach, especially for people navigating those in-between moments and when old ways of seeing the world don't quite fit anymore and something new is trying to emerge. Marie encountered integral and spiral dynamics a few years ago and made it a personal mission to share this kind of meaning making with others. She and Nish have been close collaborators for some time, and together they bring a blend of clarity, warmth, and lived practices. So with that, Nish and Marie, we're really glad you're here with us. Take it away.
Oh, bravo. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I see some new faces and some new names, but several, as you might have heard, that I'm familiar with and know in person and some virtually. Thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you to our hosts, San Diego Integral and the leadership team, for inviting Nish and I to share our most recent work. A little housekeeping and to give you a heads up about how our evening and our time together will unfold. This event has been shared in spaces outside of integral and spiral dynamics, and some people may not be familiar with terms that we will use here. Please, though, just be patient with us, and we will move to topics that are easier and more relatable. If you are interested in learning more, then look around, because you are surrounded by a group of pretty phenomenal individuals, many of which I know would be happy to give you a place to start or to even shepherd you. So later in our time together, Nish and I will share our emails. You're welcome to reach out to us. After our slide presentation, we're going to move into a guided meditation, followed by a short reflection exercise. This is your invitation to put yourself in a place where you can relax into the meditation, and maybe you want a small piece of paper and a pen for notes before our breakout group. Nish, as always, thank you for being my partner in this work.
You're very welcome, Marie. Thank you for being my partner in this work.
I will bring the slides up and you can get it started.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay. And thank you, Marie. Thank you all very much for coming and sparing your time to join us this afternoon, evening, wherever you are. So the title of this presentation is The Timeless Story, Cross-Paradigmatic Universals and the Evolution of Meaning. And very briefly, what we're going to suggest is that there are some timeless principles or archetypes, or as we will come to refer to them, fields of meaning, and we'll explain what we mean by that, that show up in different ways across all the different stages of development. And as each stage of development can be considered to be a paradigm, an entire way of thinking, being, knowing, doing, we can refer to these timeless principles or archetypes as cross-paradigmatic. And our suggestion is that it is through these universals that show up as different shapes at different stages that we as human beings seek to create meaning and make sense of what might otherwise be quite a chaotic life experience. We're going to start by looking at religion, but that's just a doorway that'll open up into a much more general consideration of human sense-making, human meaning-making, as we evolve through different stages and structures of consciousness. And to begin with, we'll consider religion to be, and we'll elaborate on this, as an evolving relationship between self and spirit. And through that relationship and the story that unfolds through that relationship, a story that shows up at every stage, we find or seek to find meaning. So let's begin. So An initial question, just to throw out there. What if religion is not a fixed set of beliefs, which is how most people perhaps still consider it to be, but rather an unfolding process that evolves alongside human consciousness? As consciousness evolves, so does religion. Ultimately, our creation also evolves. And what if religion changes because we do? What if our conceptions of spirit and self change in line with us? So I'll hand over
Thank
to
you.
Marie.
Thank you, Nish. Okay, let's begin by setting the frame. This session is not a critique of religion. Whoop, where did that go? Not a critique of religion. It is not a defense of any tradition or a call to abandon the past. It is an inquiry into how meaning itself evolves. Religion is a way of life. In this frame, we're decontextualizing the term religion from our typical associations to situate it as a way of life. So whether your religion is family, Christianity, Buddhism, science, humanity, or the cosmos, that there's a deep structure process, an epistemological way of knowing that has always existed and influences our spiritual orientation. So, to recontextualize, we're framing religion as something active, that religion is a way of life, and we suggest that it unfolds like an epic novel through the human in this process. One, to invoke. This would also be our I quadrant, but that there is an implicit drive moving the human toward connection, consciously or unconsciously, through our thoughts, our actions, and rituals. The self yearns to bring spirit into conscious awareness. Invocation may appear as prayer, sacrifice, meditation, Kundalini awakening, or even the pursuit of survival and security. Even motivations that seem purely material are attempts to secure one's place within the web of life. And from this, meaning begins to emerge. We seek to understand our we quadrant. We seek to interpret and to make meaning out of what has been invoked. This understanding may be located within ourselves, projected onto others, or oriented towards something greater than us. Here we ask the fundamental questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What does it mean to exist? And in this process, insight or revelation arises and meaning is formed. Finally, we seek to express what was implicit becomes explicit. Meaning is embodied through our words, behaviors, relationships, institutions, and ways of living. Religion as expression is not static. It is evolution in action, adaptive, creative, and continually reshaping how we live in the world. This, we propose, is the process to establishing the relationship between self and spirit. And that when that is the same epic novel, the same story that is told across cultures and eras, religions, they all tell the same story. When we cannot make meaning, where meaning cannot be found, we experience a loss. We feel disconnected and yearn for connection and restoration. This process informs the archetypal story. From paradise lost to paradise gained. We suggest that religion evolves because human cognition becomes more complex, that as the upper left, the I quadrant, becomes more complex, then the lower left, the we quadrant, complexifies, and identity expands from tribal to individual to systemic and planetary. That the world itself becomes more interconnected. That the upper right, the it quadrant, objectively, and the lower right, the its quadrant, systemically reflect this evolution, complexification. An example is that individuals explore personal meaning, they share identities, form beyond tribe or denomination. Digital technologies connect people globally, and new networked systems of practice emerge outside traditional institutions. This is evolution through complexity. As things complexify, the evolution is happening in all four quadrants. As the holonic circles get bigger and bigger, through the process of invoke, understand, and express, this is what drives evolution. It's how we make meaning. And this is what drives the evolution of religion. Religion, as we have framed it here, is not a static truth. It is a living sense-making.
Okay, thank you, Marie. So we're now going to elaborate on what we suggest, and there's many, many different ways to do this, but one way of doing this, what we suggest are these archetypal principles that show up at every stage of development in different ways, and we've listed 7 of them. Nothing magic about 7, that's just one way of doing it. And as we consider how these 7 archetypal principles show up at different stages as the human mind evolves, what we see is an evolution of meaning making. A more complex and sophisticated way of making sense of things emerges at each stage. And we can see this reflected in the way that religion has evolved through the ages. So this is our suggestion, that over the last 40,000 years plus, so going right back to the time of what we could call tribal consciousness, magical consciousness, there are 7 principles that appear again and again at every stage of development. So I'm going to briefly describe how we feel these 7 principles are generated and why, almost by definition, these have to show up every time we're talking about anything religious or spiritual at any stage. Our suggestion is that when we're talking about religion or spirituality, but primarily religion here, the 2 fundamental principles or entities, for want of a better word, that have to be there are spirit and self. If there's no spirit, there's nothing to be religious about in the way that we're defining spirit. And if there's no self, there's nobody to be religious. These 2 fundamental principles or entities have to be there, we suggest, for the very term religion or spirituality to really make sense. certainly in the way we've defined it. And what we suggest is that as this relationship between spirit and self unfolds, we see the unfolding of a story. And this story is made up here in this model of 7 principles that show up again and again. Spirit and self. When there is a disconnection between spirit and self, as I think probably most humans experience, either implicitly or explicitly, this gives rise to some kind of suffering. We have disconnected from who we really are, from the source of our being, from what is ultimately real. However, what religions give us is hope. There is a way out of that suffering. There is a way to reconnect with this connection that we've lost with spirit. We can gain knowledge of spirit through various means, and we'll come to look at those means. And we can gain what we're calling here salvation or enlightenment or liberation by reconnecting with that spirit again. And that reconnection typically shows up in our lives as love. That's the story we're telling here. Spirit, self, suffering, hope, knowledge, salvation, love. Now, of course, we're aware that the very use of these terms is coming from 1 or 2 of the stages of development. These terms themselves are not necessarily going to make sense in this form across all stages. So perhaps a more general way to look at this is to invoke these terms through questions. And I think these questions in different forms do turn up all the way through our developmental process. What is ultimately real? Who or what am I? Why does life hurt? What makes life worth living? How do we know truth? What does wholeness look like? What binds us together? So these are the 7 principles or questions that we suggest turn up again and again to tell the same kind of story.
Excellent. Thank you. So, what might the response to these living inquiries look like when framed through the 7 principles or fields of meaning across the ages? We're going to go on a journey together. If I can get the slideshow. There we go. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong part. Sorry, I jumped ahead. Sorry, Nish.
That's okay. So we're going to suggest that these archetypes are also not just principles or doctrines, but are actually living fields of meaning. And we're going to talk in more detail when we come to it. Sorry, Marie, we just need to go back a slide.
Not going the right way, is it? Okay, hold on, guys. Sorry about that.
That's it. Great. And what we're going to suggest is that these principles are not simply doctrines, but they are what we call fields of meaning. And we will describe in much more detail later what we mean by that. But these fields are always present, whatever stage we're at. They're always interpreted differently, no matter what stage we're at. And they're always evolving along with consciousness. So it's the same principles throughout the human story, but different and new expressions at each stage. Okay, over to Marie.
Okay, thank you. Put a note in the chat there, so obviously I'm eager to share. Right. So going back to this, so what might the response to those living inquiries to these fields of meanings look like when it's framed through the 7 principles across the ages? Let's take a look together. I'm going to get the chat out of the way. There we go. Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So the animistic and mythic worlds. So in these early worlds, reality is not inert. It is alive, it's relational, and it's responsive. There's no clear separation between matter and meaning. and existence is participatory. One does not stand apart from the world, one belongs in it. So here, what is real is not abstract, it is alive in nature, moving through rivers, animals, storms, and our departed ancestors. The world is in that way ensouled. The self, the boundaries of the self here are porous, they're fluid and shared. The self is woven into kinship, land, lineage, and story. It is tribal and relational, not yet personal. Suffering is experienced as a loss of harmony. It is not random. Something has fallen out of balance, and it signals a rupture in relationship with spirits, ancestors, land, or the tribe. Hope is about renewal and rooted in continuity and belonging. Through ritual restoration, story, and seasonal cycles, hope is restored again and again. Knowledge. Here, knowledge or truth is revealed through dreams, visions, and sacred narratives and myths. Wisdom is transmitted. One is initiated into it. Salvation or wholeness means being rightly placed within the web of existence and within the rhythm of nature. It's not moral purity, it's harmony and balance with sacred order. Love. Love is belonging, obligation, reciprocity, and care, kinship, and reverence. It is the bond between humans, ancestors, animals, land, and the cosmos.
So let's move to the next stage. This is a stage we've referred to as the polytheistic and heroic stage. In spiral dynamics, this is the stage we refer to as red. So let's see how the 7 principles show up here. Here, spirit is often seen now in terms of many gods, power gods, personal powers. So slightly more transcendent than what we saw at the animistic tribal stage. Self here we see now, rather than simply identifying with the tribe or having a membership self, we now see an emerging ego that is able to distinguish itself, begins to distinguish itself from the tribe. This is an emerging ego and emerging will. Suffering here is often seen in terms of challenges. We have challenges that we have to overcome in life. And we often see here our lives in terms of our fate. And that fate will be filled with things we have to conquer, things we have to overcome. And that's where our suffering often comes from. And suffering here is often seen as a way of learning, not purely in negative terms, but also can be in positive terms. Hope here comes from some of the great things now the newly emerging ego can do, can find it's able to do. Strength, honor, victory. These are held out as goals for us at this stage. We can have victory over our enemies. We can get honor for ourselves. We can show strength in the midst of great difficulty. Knowledge here comes from trials and from experience. And sometimes this is ritualized. We have to go through trials like manhood trials to prove that we're worthy of being adults here. And that is a kind of knowledge that we're given through those difficulties, through those challenges. Salvation here comes from aligning ourselves with these many gods, these many personal powers, and getting their favor. It's through divine favor we can attain salvation or favor with the gods here. And finally, love here shows up, again, as we would expect, in a very egoic way, egoic love, loyalty to those who've shown loyalty to us, pride in our achievements and victories, devotion to those who have shown loyalty to us, devotion to those gods with whom we feel alignment or reflection. So that's how the same story we saw in the previous stage now shows up in a different way here. So let's move to the next stage.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So the axial and traditional religions. So in these worlds, reality is no longer experienced as immediate and alive, but as ordered by a higher moral truth. Meaning is revealed from beyond. Existence becomes a test of alignment. One does not simply belong, one must become worthy. And here, spirit, or what is ultimately real, is no longer immanent or many. It's transcendent and singular. Spirit becomes a higher moral order beyond nature and beyond the human. Reality is governed by divine law, cosmic justice, or sacred truth. The self becomes a soul accountable to this higher order. Identity becomes moral, personal, and eternal. Suffering becomes moral misalignment. Pain now carries meaning, punishment, tests, lessons, consequence. Hope is offered through redemption. Life gains meaning through obedience, forgiveness, righteousness, and the divine promise. Knowledge, truth is revealed by God, prophets, or through sacred texts. Knowledge becomes codified, preserved, and authoritative. To know is not to participate, it is to receive and obey. Salvation. Wholeness now means alignment with the good, with righteousness, with forgiveness, and with worthiness before God. Love. Love becomes duty, ethics, and responsibility, a moral obligation. Community and society is formed through shared law, shared values, and sacred order.
Okay, thank you, Marie. So now we move to the next stage, and this is quite a big leap. We move to a stage which we're referring to here as the modern and humanist worldview, roughly orange in spirodynamics terms, for those of you who are familiar with spirodynamics. So now, with the rise of reason and the need for evidence, two of the big things that emerge at this stage, we start to seriously question and even rationally deconstruct some of the beliefs that we've held in the previous 2 or 3 stages. And here, spirit, or what is ultimately real, which is how we're defining spirit, is now reinterpreted basically as the material world, or the energy that makes up the material world. Spirit now is matter, or simply mystery. We simply don't know. We start to move away now from religious faith as is commonly understood, and rationalism, humanism, modernism becomes the religion at this stage. The self here is now seen and experienced as the rational individual who seeks to make sense of this material world through reason. And suffering is no longer seen as misalignment with God or problems with the spirits, but is seen very much in rational terms. We suffer because of either material lack, we don't have the means to live a good life as defined by this stage, or some kind of psychological lack. Maybe we just don't have enough knowledge to know how to navigate this world in a rational, efficient, happy way. Happiness now becomes the real test here rather than any kind of spiritual salvation. Hope here is through progress. Humans will progress, will learn more about the universe in which they live, and through innovation, we'll make discoveries and inventions that will help us to live a more convenient, effective, comfortable, pleasurable life. Knowledge here is really only through one quite well-defined means here, through science, through reason. Other forms of knowledge, including the more traditional spiritual forms of knowledge, are often discarded here and seen as superstitious. Science and reason becomes the only or primary means of knowledge here. And salvation is not really seen in traditional spiritual terms anymore. Salvation here is health for the body, success, including financial success, achievement, and mastery, self-mastery, the ability to master ourselves and master the way we live in the world. And love here is seen not in terribly sentimental terms necessarily, but in pretty rational terms, through mutual respect. We respect others, they respect us. I'm okay, you're okay. And through attaining autonomy and giving others autonomy. So a very different story being told here, but hopefully, as you can see, it's the same principles that are showing up now in very, very different ways. Okay, so over to the next stage.
Thank you, Nish. All right, so next, let's look at these same principles and their expressions as they come through in the postmodern consciousness and progressive spirituality. So in these forms, reality is understood as relational, it's contextual, and again, we're moving towards interconnection. Meaning is no longer singular, it is co-created. Existence becomes a process of healing and inclusion. So here, spirit is no longer distant or singular. It is an interconnected living whole. Reality is relational, emergent, and participatory. The sacred is not found above the world, but within it. This moment, the present moment. The self is no longer autonomous, it is relational and contextual. Identity is shaped by culture, history, trauma, and power. Suffering. Suffering is no longer personal failure or mechanical error. It is disconnection and injustice. Pain arises from exclusion, oppression, fragmentation, and a loss of belonging. Hope. Hope becomes compassion and inclusion. Meaning is found in liberation, healing, and in mutual care. Knowledge. Truth is no longer singular, it is plural. Plural perspectives and knowledge is shaped by perspective, language, culture, and power. Salvation. Wholeness becomes healing and belonging. It's not perfection, but integration. It's not transcendence, it's inclusion. And here, love expands beyond kin, the nation, or belief. Love becomes empathy, solidarity, and universal care.
And finally, the last stage we'll be considering on this journey is what we're referring to, of course, as the integral and holistic stage, integral and holistic religion, spirituality. So at this stage, we're now able to see the stages that have gone before. We're able to perceive the evolutionary movement in all four quadrants that precedes and includes this stage. Our circle of concern, if you like, has moved from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric and now to cosmocentric. So One way we now conceive and even experience spirit at this stage is as an evolving cosmic intelligence of which we're a part. The self, we now see the self in much more complex terms than we have before. We see the self as multidimensional. There's many different aspects to self: physical, embodied, emotional, cognitive, mental, psychological, social, cultural, moral, ethical. And we see the self as developmental, perhaps for the first time, clearly. We can look back at our journey so far and see how our sense of self, our sense of identity has developed through these different stages. One of the ways in which we might frame suffering at this stage is through fragmentation, the inability to see the wholeness behind the multiplicity, and through stagnation, the inability to translate to more healthy versions of whatever stage we're at, or the inability or unwillingness to transform to higher stages than the stage at which we find ourselves. Hope here is through integration and through growth, to integrate what we have disowned, which may certainly include some of the earlier stages that we may have repressed. Hope here is also through growth, through moving to deeper and broader and more complex perspectives that can include more of reality. Many different ways of gaining knowledge here. An integral epistemology starts to emerge here. Just 4 examples, but there's many others. We can know through the mind, we can know through the body, we can know through intuition, we can know systemically. Salvation here is really seen perhaps through the evolutionary developmental process itself. We see holes within holes within holes. It is through this wholeness in process that humanity and even creation ultimately can gain its salvation. The cosmos becomes progressively more aware of itself, including through us. And love here is perhaps the force of integration. That way we can integrate parts of ourselves, the perspectives and well-being of others, and eventually the cosmos itself. It is through that process and force, that living force of integration, that's where we find love. So again, the same story we've now seen in 6 different ways at these 6 different stages that we've examined. Same principles, different expressions.
Thank you, Nish. Every one of these stages we've shared with you have solved real problems. They weren't naive, they weren't stupid, and they weren't wrong. They revealed genuine truths about what it means to be human, what it means to belong, what it means to suffer, to hope, to love. But here's the pattern. Each stage becomes limited when it is mistaken for the final truth. What was once a doorway becomes a wall. When what was expanded or what once expanded our understanding becomes something we defend, development doesn't work by erasing what came before. It works by including what came before and then transcending its limits. That's what growth actually is, healthy growth. It's not rejection, it's not superiority, it's not replacement, it's integration. And this matters because many of our deepest conflicts today are not between good and bad people. They are between differing meaning worlds, each holding a part of the truth, each mistaking that part for the whole. Our call is to learn to see this pattern, to not win arguments, but to grow beyond them. So we suggest that most of what we call crises today is not moral collapse. It's a developmental one. That the old maps, the ways we understood identity, truth, success, belonging, and meaning, are no longer sufficient for the complexity that we face. And the new maps are still being born. So what we experience is confusion, polarization, exhaustion, fragmentation. That is our suffering. But this disorientation is not a failure. It's what it feels like when an old way of seeing stops working before a new one has fully formed. Because meaning used to be inherited, it must now be cultivated. This is the invitation of our time. Not to cling to what no longer fits and not to demonize what we don't understand, but to grow the inner capacity to hold complexity. I suggest that our future will not be built by those who are most certain, but by those who can integrate.
Okay, thank you, Marie. And now we come to the final part of the presentation, which we're calling Toward an Emerging Meta Stage. And we're going to look here, just go back briefly again to the principles and our suggestion that another way of looking at these 7 principles is to call them fields of meaning. So we're just going to look a little bit briefly at what we mean by fields of meaning and how this conception and ultimately experience can help us to grow. So what do we mean when we say that these 7 principles are fields of meaning? So a field, we suggest, is something that's shared, it's something that's underlying, and it's something that helps us, enables us, almost makes it inevitable that we make sense of our experience in a certain way. It is a context of sense-making that shapes how our experience appears, even before we think about it. It's preconceptual in some sense. These fields of meaning, even though we've presented them conceptually, what they are in themselves, we suggest, are not ideas in the mind, but rather we can think of them as subtle relational patterns that help to organize at each stage of development, no matter where we are. They help to organize perception, emotion, value, interpretation at that stage. The fields of meaning are in some sense prior to any stage, but they take different shapes at different stages as we evolve. We're calling them fields because, like gravity is a field that shapes movement without itself being visible, our suggestion is that these fields, these principles are fields because they influence our experience without themselves being directly visible. They shape our sense-making. And what we see and experience are the shapes, not the fields themselves. And each stage contains expressions of this field through these fields through beliefs, symbols, and stories. That's what we've just seen across those 6 stages. But none of those expressions can fully contain the field, which is why further development is always possible. That same field can always take a new shape, potentially a more complex shape, a more full shape as we continue to develop. And this is where it gets interesting, I think, as consciousness evolves, we're able to inhabit these fields more consciously. The conversation we're having now simply might not have been possible at significantly earlier stages of development. We're now no longer simply seeing the forms, the shapes as reality itself, but we're now able to look back across the stages that have led to where we are now and start to intuit these fields that have taken these different shapes. And we're able to at least move towards inhabiting these fields more consciously. And we'll come to see what we mean by that. And as we inhabit these fields more consciously, this gives us a greater flexibility of perspective rather than a simple fixed identification with a particular set of shapes. We move beyond identification with shape to intuition and embodiment of field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. May I add something, Nish?
Yes, of course. Please do, Marie.
Thank you. What I want to draw into your mind is a vision of how all of these fields exist simultaneously, and that there is a dynamic way in which they are relating to each other through us that is causing certain views or perceptions. And that through this interaction, Nish and I will flesh out, but I see this as also as a graduated theory of change. These fields are present at all times, always. And that as we push into a meta-awareness, into integral spirituality, then we build the capacity to become aware of where these things are in our own meaning making for a check of whether that's really authentic or what's really fit for purpose, given whatever it is that we're in relationship to, and that we can shift. And that by a process of that, we can inspire the change we hope to see, the change that we want to experience in ourselves, and the change we may want to experience in the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. And finally, where do these fields of meaning even come from? What does that question even mean? So we suggest 3 possible interpretations or understandings of where these fields of meaning might originate. And those understandings themselves are developmental. We suggest there's a pre-rational, a rational, and a post or trans-rational understanding of where these fields of meaning actually come from. A pre-rational understanding might be quite metaphysical. We might understand that these fields of meaning are sort of involutionary givens. As the whole has thrown itself out into multiplicity, it has left footprints of itself in manifestation. These principles, these fields of meaning, might be understood pre-rationally as God's footprints in manifestation. These are the clues that the divine has left about itself in the world. And these are very primordial orientations towards spirit, self, and wholeness that precede our reflection. So this might be a metaphysical understanding of where these fields come from. A more rational understanding might be that, well, these fields of meaning maybe are just conceptual abstractions. We look at these stages, we see what's in common between these stages, and we basically structure our meaning through language, models, symbols, explanatory frameworks. The rational stage might look at everything we've presented and say, well, we're just moving to higher and higher stages of abstraction here. It's probably not going to see anything metaphysical going on. And we suggest, very suggestive at this point, that maybe a post-rational understanding of where these fields of meaning come from might be that these are evolutionary intuitions. Maybe when our separate self-sense first appeared, maybe at the tribal stage and increasingly beyond, and the dilemmas that inevitably accompany a separate self-sense, that meaning-making capacities began to emerge. And these intuitions, these initial evolutionary intuitions, began to emerge and have continued to shape our meaning-making ever since. So these are three possible ways to answer the question of where do these fields of meaning come from? Involutionary givens, conceptual abstractions, evolutionary intuitions. And perhaps it's a bit of all of those.
Excellent. Okay. So what we suggest here, that it's not a destination, that it is a practice, that what's emerging here is not a new belief system. Earlier stages have focused on forms of meaning with specific answers about spirit, self, truth, and love. And what we're pointing to now is a shift from forms of meaning to fields of meaning. That means learning to move between perspectives without losing ourselves, to recognize partial truths without turning them into absolutes, to sense what is happening not just intellectually, but embodied and systemically. Here, love is no longer just an emotion or a moral idea. It becomes the organizing intelligence, the capacity to hold difference without fragmentation. This stage is not about having the right answers. It's about choosing perspectives consciously, holding complexity without collapsing into certainty, and integrating truth, compassion, and systems into a coherent way of being. This is not easy work. But it feels like the necessary work. The intention is to build deeper capacity. Nish, may I invite you to comment if you have anything to add?
Yes, so what we're going to move on to now is away from what has been quite theoretical, but just to maybe take you through a guided meditation into what it might be to feel into these fields of meaning and see how these might be showing up or in your own life. How is this archetypal story actually manifesting itself in you? And how might this help you to see where your own sense making is coming from? Okay.
Guys, let me get reoriented. Got a whole new setup since I've moved here, and not quite as adept at it yet. Thank you. Okay. All right. As Nish alluded to, We'd like to take you now through a guided meditation. So the invitation. Quiet the mind. Soften the breath. As we turn inward now, notice that you're not trying to create meaning, but gently sensing the field of meaning that is already holding your experience, shaping what feels familiar, conflicted, or newly alive. This is not a journey towards something distant or abstract. This is an invitation into a deeply felt embodied recognition, a remembering of what is already alive in you. The 7 principles we will explore are not ideas to adopt or answers to arrive at. They are fields of meaning, already active, already moving, already expressed through your breath, your sensations, your awareness, and your life. So please find a quiet and comfortable place where your body can rest. You may lie or sit down. Allow your eyes to close gently and without effort. And let's begin by arriving in the body and by noticing your breath, not changing it, not moving it, simply noticing that it is already happening. Feel the inhale arrive and feel the exhale release. Let your awareness drop out of your head and into the lived experience of your body. Notice points of contact where your body meets the floor, the chair, the ground beneath you. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to become. You are already participating in the field of life simply by being here. Allow the breath to move naturally like a tide that knows exactly how to come and go.
So let's just turn our attention now to the first principle, the principle of spirit. What is ultimately real? Rather than asking this as a question to be answered, feel it as a presence to be recognized. Notice the aliveness in your body, the subtle hum of sensation, the quiet intelligence of your breath. Spirit is not something separate from you. It is the field of being in which your experience is arising right now. Just feel into this, the space around your body, the space within your body, the awareness, noticing both. This is not an idea of spirit. This is spirit recognizing itself as lived experience. And notice what feels deeply familiar here. Where does recognition arise without effort? Where might resistance or questioning appear? Let all of it belong. Nothing needs to be resolved. And now let's move to the second principle, the principle of self. Who or what am I? Again, let this be an embodied inquiry rather than a mental search. Notice thoughts arising. Notice sensations shifting. Notice emotions coming and going. And notice there is something here that is aware of all of it. You're not required to define the self. Simply feel the sense of being, the I am that exists before names, before roles, before stories. Let awareness rest as itself. Ask gently, what in me is already aware? What does it feel like to be present without description? Notice what feels known in your body. Notice where identity tightens. Notice where something opens or softens. This inquiry unfolds in time. There is nothing to finish. And now let's move to the third principle, the principle of suffering. Why does life hurt? Bring attention to the places in your body that carry weight, tension, or tenderness. Without revisiting stories, simply feel what is present. Suffering is not a failure of life. It is a signal, an expression of sensitivity, of attachment, of care, of meaning. Just notice how pain shows up as sensation, emotion, or contraction. And notice also the awareness that can hold it. Suffering exists within a larger field of presence that is not harmed by it. And just ask inwardly, what feels familiar about this landscape? Where do I resist what is here? Is there a deeper understanding arising, not intellectually, but somatically? And just let compassion arise naturally, without forcing it.
And now let's turn our attention towards the fourth principle, hope. What makes life worth living? Do not search for inspiration. Instead, notice what already pulls you forward. Feel into moments of warmth, curiosity, quiet longing. Hope often lives as a subtle orientation toward life rather than a dramatic feeling. It might feel like a gentle leaning forward, a softening in the chest, a willingness to stay. Hope is not separate from struggle. It coexists with it. Ask, what in me is still oriented toward life? What continues, even quietly? Let that orientation be felt, not named. And now turn your attention, please, towards the fifth principle, knowledge. How do I know truth? Notice the difference between thinking about truth and feeling resonance. Let your attention move through your body. Where do you feel clarity? Where do you feel contraction? Truth often announces itself as coherence, a sense of alignment rather than certainty. Knowledge lives not only in thoughts, but in posture, breath, intuition, and timing. Ask gently, how does my body recognize what is real? What feels trustworthy without explanation? Allow your inner knowing to be subtle. It does not need to speak loudly to be real. And now our sixth principle, salvation. What does wholeness feel like? Release any image of perfection. Wholeness is not the absence of difficulty. It is the capacity to include everything without fragmentation. Feel your body as a single, integrated field. Even discomfort belongs. Notice moments when you feel more gathered, more unified. Ask, what feels already whole here? Where am I allowing myself to be exactly as I am? Salvation in this sense is not something earned, it is recognized. Let yourself rest inside that recognition. And to our seventh principle, love. What binds us together? Bring your awareness to your heart, not as a metaphor, but as a felt center. Notice warmth, openness, or even guardedness. Love is not something that you generate. It is a field of connection that moves through you. Feel the way your breath connects inside and outside. The way sound, space, and presence interweave. Now ask, where do I already experience connection? What opens when I stop trying to control it? Let love be spacious. Let it include boundaries, tenderness, and strength.
And now allow awareness to widen. Feel all 7 principles, not as separate ideas, but as interwoven expressions of one living field, your lived experience. And notice what felt immediately familiar. What stirred resistance or tension? What felt newly revealed, not as information, but as recognition? These principles are not teachings you carry. They are patterns already enacted through you, in how you breathe, feel, relate, and live. And take a slow, deep breath in. And as you exhale, allow everything to settle naturally. And when you are ready, just begin to notice the room again. Feel your fingers, feel your toes. Let your body gently reorient. And when it feels right, open your eyes. And thank yourself, not for achieving anything, but for listening deeply to what is already alive within you.
Welcome back. While you're in this space, we'd like to move into a gentle reflective exercise. We're going to give you 5 minutes and 3 questions. If you would please make some notes in response to these questions into your experience in the meditation and in the 7 principles fields of meaning. I'm putting them into the chat. All right, In this reflective exercise, please choose 3 principles. What feels strongest in your life? What's most challenged or conflicted? And what might be emerging, or what is calling you forward? Please take a few minutes and make a few notes.
And we would encourage you not to think about this too much, but to feel into it in the way we have done in the meditation just now. Which principle feels the strongest? Which feels the most challenged or conflicted? And which principle is emerging or calling you forward in some way?
Nish, you're being asked to put the 7 principles in the chat too.
Certainly, I'll do that.
Thanks, Nish.
And just for clarity on the breakouts, we're going to do, it's going to be 5 minutes per person will be in dyads, so it's not 5 minutes total. And there's going to be a couple minutes for while we organize and make sure we have somebody in every room. So there'll be time for that as well.
Okay, I've listed the 7 principles in the chat, just as a reminder. So we're asking you to choose 3 of these.
Okay, are we ready, Nish, then, for the breakout?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Just a couple notes. While in dialogue with each other, try to speak from lived experience, listen without fixing, reflect patterns that you hear, and encourage inquiry over agreement.
So we're just going to be...
And the last one I would say is have fun.
Yeah. So in these breakouts, just express to each other, you're going to be in groups of 2, these 3 principles you've chosen. The one that's showing up the strongest, the one that is the most conflicted, the one that's calling you forward.
Breakout sessions are not recorded.
Okay. I think that looks like everything. All right. Listen, we have just a few minutes left, everyone. So what wants to be shared?
I'll just say, if I may, am I on? Look, I'm quite exhilarated at the end of this 2 hours. I didn't expect that I was going to last the 2 hours, but I think it's been absolutely fantastic, and I feel exhilarated and joyful and happy, and it's given me a much bigger framework. I've been working through a few things on my own, but this has been really helpful. So thank you very much. I'm definitely going to buy the book.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Yes. Is there anything that came up that an insight or something that wants to be shared from the questions? Which principle feels the strongest? Which principle feels the most conflicted or challenging? Or which principle is calling you forward or is emerging?
Well, I'll jump in.
Thanks, Larry.
I only want to jump in because I think my answer is maybe a little unique. All 3 questions pretty much was the same answer of the 7, which is spirit. Yeah, at all. I mean, not that the other ones weren't important or didn't show up, well, suffering didn't show up at all anywhere. But yeah, spirit, strongest in my life, most challenged and conflicted, emerging or calling me forward, spirit. And getting clear on what that is and isn't, and how I am that and how I show up as not that, moment to moment in whatever situation. Yeah, so to keep it short, I'll leave it there.
Lovely. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
I'll jump in. Mostly thank you, everybody, for such a rich night, so much to think about. As far as the three questions, for me, suffering comes up very strongly right now. It's something that ties me up every day with the suffering that's going on in our nation right now. And I am most challenged by love, because when I perceive so much suffering, I tend to split and to demonize. And the salvation part kind of came through as emergent for me in terms of how do I hold my concern, my deep concern about suffering, without demonizing and with making connections still, even with those that I would split off from, because the splits don't work. They don't. They lay there as more suffering. So thank you for all of that food for work.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse.
I put a little note in the chat here just to notice common longings, shared frustrations, emerging insights, and that the individual stories reveal the collective fields. Thank you. With just a few minutes left here, Tom and Eloy, I'm not sure what to do. How do you want to handle where we are right now? I hate to end the group process, but
Yeah.
please.
Ellen, do you want to go? Oh, Karen.
Yeah, just answering your previous question. And I wanted to I acknowledge that in my breakout, I was with an old friend, and we didn't go through the exercise exactly as you asked, because we were kind of reframing in our own words through soul and other things that we connect on. But an insight that I'm having as we're here, and that's sort of been coming through your extremely excellent and totally resonant with me presentation, by the way, is the pull from hope to wholeness. That's the innate wholeness that we are moving towards, is kind of like the reflection of hope. And that I was having some insight when you were talking about the differences between postmodern and integral, and seeing that the getting caught up in time, getting caught up in this happening now, is where compassion can get stuck, and where suffering happens. Where we're not realizing ourselves as part of a process, part of a movement, and part of what can a kind of healthy respect for the unknown, for spirit, for what could come through emergence that is beyond any one of us, in our in terms of the moment necessarily. Yeah. So kind of some of these things coming together through your talk and through just being here with you. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. I'm deeply touched and so happy for you, and that you're sharing all of this with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you.
So, Karen, why don't you lead off the social that we're going to get to, because we're just about out of time. right now. And I'll get us to social real quick. Are you okay with that? Karen?
Nish.
Which Karen, are you talking to me?
You, yeah. Because you had your hand up before.
I did?
Yeah. Oh, I
No,
thought I
I
did,
didn't.
so maybe not.
I didn't mean to. So are you calling on me to answer the question of the three things? I have.
No, let's wait until we get to the social and then I'll
Okay.
call on you.
Okay.
So let's conclude the formal part of the meeting today. Um, um, Lost my notes. Yeah, so we're at the end of our time. And I really want to thank, I think you can tell how much Nish and Marie, this group enjoyed your presentation and what you invoked in all of us. I think it was outstanding in doing this. So if people want to learn more about you, did you put something in the chat? Where can they reach you?
I'll grab our emails right now. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So that would be very, very useful. And I'm hoping your applications come in for ICON. In fact, I would even like to spend a little time fine tuning some of the emphasis that I would love to see. That would be dynamite. So a quick reminder, our next meeting is Valentine's Day next month. Please join us. You're going to have to wait to see who we have scheduled. I'm trying to get people that are going to be at ICON speaking to do presentations so that you can get previews of what it'll be like. So please RSVP at one of our San Diego Integral's websites so that we know who's coming. You can find more information at sandiegointegral.org or the Facebook website. So now we're going to move to the more
Or the
social.
meetup, Tom. Or the meetup. The meetup's the main one.
Yeah, the meetup is the main one. Sorry. Thank you, Eloy. So make your reservations on our meetup. And if you can put in the link in the chat, Eloy, that would really help. So we're going to move to the more informal segment. And I thought I'd start it with a couple of notes. I mean, like most of you, we're walking away with things we're going to really metabolize for a while. And I have all kinds of notes, but I picked three of them. One is we are on such a threshold of change right now. I loved what you said before, Marie. Meaning used to be inherited, but now it must be cultivated. And the awesome individual responsibility we're all weighted with knowing that is how do we construct the meaning and what is available to form up so that there is purpose and meaning in everything. I love how you said, Marie, too, the future will be built by those who can integrate. The beauty is there's so much to construct from as we're on this threshold of purpose and meaning. And then finally, and Nish, you said this, the fact that we're all consciously evolving means that these fields can be more consciously integrated and entered, more consciously entered. And in the alignment with like what we're doing at ICON, closer to coherence. As a group, we can't quite create coherence. We stumble into it and we're aware of the beauty and love that forms up in these moments, but we're just getting closer. But the despair in this transition that we're undergoing, and we're somewhat consciously aware, we're somewhat aware of the shadow that inhibits every moment. But we're not there, and I thought your illumination tonight was wonderful. So I'll leave it there. I thought Karen would have something really profound to say. I bet she does. And let's dialogue about this. It's a wonderful idea.
Well, I have to
Thank you.
admit, Tom, I missed the first hour because we've got way too much happening here, but I have known Nish and Marie for a while, and I'm sure their presentation was profound. I can see the effect it's had on all of you. I will look forward eagerly to when you post it, and then I can catch the first hour that I missed. But yes, I mean, Nish and Marie and I, and so many of us share this passion. We feel at whatever our particular bandwidth is, we feel that there is a new integral, there is a new era approaching, and that this breakdown that has just accelerated, just even in the last month, that this breakdown is a breakthrough, and we are sensing this landscape beyond what becomes possible. And I love this group. I love the group that's putting on Icon. I love the larger integral community, because we are consciously trying to feel forward into it, for calling on all our best qualities to be the best we can, collectively and individually. We are weaving the future. We are co-creating the future. We are envisioning it. We are breathing it. We are living it in all the different ways that people act in the world and and inside themselves. I love what we're creating together. This is the passion that keeps me going in my 70s, that keeps me engaged with life. So I love what we're doing. I love what we're all doing together individually. So I mean, that's a fairly general comment, but since you threw the ball at me, Tom, that's what I'm lobbing back to you now.
I knew you had something. Anyone else? What's hitting you?
Well, I just wanted to say that we're including what happened before. We're moving to the future, but we're learning from all the previous things we went through. We re-embrace the beauty that humans have had from the very first time they've been on. That to me is so gorgeous, because so many times when you move on, like in the spiral, you reject what happened before. And the idea of more and more synthesis and more inclusion, it just gives me such joy to even begin to think that there's something there with that, because I don't think that that's seen very widely.
Mhm. Mhm. It's a practice.
That's the other part. It's a practice. It's a job. I
Yeah.
consider it a job.
Yeah.
And so suffering isn't suffering anymore. It's eternal striving when you see that.
Mhm.
It's so beautiful. It's a practice, but it's a job. It's a recognition that this is our work. This can be our work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margot.
John, we kept you awake and you're beaming. Do you have something?
Oh, it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon now. I know I'm firing on all cylinders. No, beyond that, I have nothing other than I agree with what everybody's saying, that we are at a really crucial time in our human history. And I think integral, and even what's beyond integral, even more of a what people are calling an integrative meta-theoretical approach is what we need to be, what we are starting to move into. And I'm excited by it, and I'm committed to it. And we also have a Sydney Integral group, which meets online once a month too, which is where I can share a lot of my integral passion as well. So
Yeah, we used to
been
connect
lovely.
with
Thank you.
We used to connect with the Sydney group, and I don't know how we lost connection, but we've done some things together with the Sydney group in the past.
Great. Great.
Eloy just called my attention to it's 4 a.m. for Nish right now.
2 a.m.
2 a.m. Jeez.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah, that's where staying up late segues into getting up early.
Suzanne, you're smiling like ever.
Well, most of it was familiar to me, and what I sense more and more, I'm already now in my 80s, is that we're such a special group in terms of what we can understand and handle and complexity and all of that. It is so far apart from what most people can do, that's actually of concern to me, that we're becoming so specialized, so special, that we ought to be aware of that and not lose the connection to, I don't know how to even call it, ordinary folks all over the world. Yes. And even more so those who are really not privileged like we are.
Yes. This has been one of my concerns for a while. How can we take this beautiful vision and these beautiful ideas and help get them outside our lovely little ghetto, out into the wider world? And this is why I want to, my friends in Cosmos Cooperative, a lot of you will be familiar with the book Integral Life Practice. Right. One of the 4 authors was Marco Morelli, who helped put that together. He has started an artists cooperative. It's been going for 10 years now. And this is, it's just done a massive expansion, but it's art, literature, entertainment, as so many of you are doing so much work on so many fronts, law and regenerative communities and social justice and so on. But the entertainment and the arts are also one of the ways where we can metabolize the core ideas enough that we can take it into regular language, out of the jargon, out of the intellectual jargon, into work that will reach a wider public. And I see that starting to happen with Cosmos Cooperative and some other fronts. So I think part of this great crunch era we're in, a very intense transition right now, but I'm feeling this push into wider horizons at the same time. The breakdown, this is my intuitive side, the breakdown really is feeling like a breakthrough. As the world so much is crumbling, I'm also feeling walls crumbling that are showing us vistas, very hopeful vistas. So that's our job.
If I could jump in here, when I first came across this information, which, by the way, was as a result of some severe suffering in my own life and questioning, when I started to come across spiral dynamics, integral, and a few other adjacent things like complexity theory, I thought, why doesn't everybody know this? Why isn't this information easily accessible and out there for anyone who is doing the same kind of seeking and asking the same kinds of questions that I am? And so I really did feel like this, how do I work in a way that expands the potential for people to come into touch with this material, well, not necessarily needing to be so intellectual or conceptual, but to make it relatable. And I will say my mother is a part of that. She said to me, Marie, you have to make this information accessible to the single mother with children that's working 2 jobs. Now, how are you going to reach her? And so that as something that rides in the back of my mind or keeps me in relating to this work and finding new and creative ways to express it is why I do what it is that I'm doing. Now, in a way that might be a real material expression of that is in this work through the principles. We know that this is a particular group, but Nish and I, in dialogue, in realizing the potential in the principles purely for relatedness, so it can be more expansive, more people might be able to find it, but also for impact and for real transformation, that you don't need to know integral or spiral dynamics. I'm going on a little bit here, and I think, Nish, you probably want to say something here. I apologize.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, I think one of the interesting things to come out of this is that there is this archetypal story at every stage. It takes many different forms, but there is some kind of story or myth that each stage tells in its own way. So, and this is just a question I'm putting out there. I don't know the answer, but is there a way that we can find or shepherd into being a new story or a new myth, a new way of working through the principles, telling that story that is legitimate to varying degrees across all the stages?
Oh.
I think that's kind of the way we might be able to reach people who are at some of the earlier stages, because that's what we have in common across the stages. We're all doing something in common where we've lost connection and we want to reconnect in different ways. Can we construct, instead of seeing this as a timeless story across stages, can we now bring into being a universal story, a universal myth that can speak across all the stages somehow? That might be a way of reaching across the stages.
Do you already have within you a sense of what that story is? Because sometimes the question is preceded by the answer at some level.
I think the answer may lie not in a concrete story, but in a practice where people are able to find their own stories. I know that's not really an answer, but that's probably all I have at the moment. But I think somehow we have to do two things: help people or give people a practice to generate, manifest their own story, and also maybe find a universal story that everyone can relate to. What gives me hope, and this is going to sound a little strange, but what gives me hope that this is possible is that hero and heroine's journeys are already so universal in other forms of media like film or book or novels, that there seems to be something inherent in humans to connect with something bigger than themselves. We can see that across these culture wars, but across these different cultures, pre-modern, modern, postmodern. I think this need to connect or quest to connect to something bigger than ourselves takes different forms across all of these. Maybe that is what can touch people and inspire people. That there is some point to this, that there is some telos, that there is something bigger than us calling them. But apart from that, I don't know how to put that in more concrete terms at this point. But I think that's probably what we have to work towards.
So the entry point to this new story, this morning I asked ChatGPT, how could I attract younger people into Integral? And it ground out about 4 pages. But the one that really resonated with me, Karen and I alluded to it, the chaos of the transition we're in right now, the fragmentation. Don't sell the intellect, sell the map that resolves all most of the fragmentation to the younger generation. So I'm going to noodle that and think about how that should show up in social media. But it felt alive to me because we are on that threshold.
Yes.
As Marie said, we used to inherit meaning. We don't do that. We have to construct it now and help them construct it.
Yeah, this is just a side note is we have a member, Shara Moskowitz, that's a board member of Unity of Testament, who's doing applying integral theory to that group. And I plan to share the video with her when we're done. And anyway, I'm thinking that, there are some non-traditional churches that would be a good starting point, like a leverage point, or like Unitarian churches, because you get quite a mix of people in the Unitarian churches.
I'm working on that one.
Oh, okay, very good.
I'd like to, I really hear Suzanne's point. That integral can actually, in a way, get in the way of our connecting with particularly the earlier so-called stages of development or evolution. And to Marie's mother's point about, you know, how, well, hey, the mom with 2 kids. I mean, so reflecting, both of those reflecting the earlier stages as I'm looking at it. And I'm wondering how much we're missing, if it is a fact or reality, that these stages are evolutional. They're not just something you study them and you just jump into them. Especially those who are at red, purple in particular, tribal, they see it as dangerous or just stupid. Red and purple, especially purple. Purple sees it as they're not us. They need to die. I don't have answers here. I'm pretty good at asking questions or exploring into, leaning into things to consider. And one of the things that keeps hitting me is these are stages of development. So if you're at purple, even red, even amber, there's not much capacity of mind to make sense of anything integral as I'm experiencing it so far, and I'm open to changing my mind on that for sure. Wilbur used to talk about that it takes, if you're kind of like on it, it takes maybe 5 years to get through a stage. Marie, did you want to say something?
Sorry, Larry, I had a response. Yeah, so another emphasis that we try to push back on or to point to when something like this comes up is that in some ways too, it's not necessarily about pushing people towards a higher level of development, but it's creating healthy human beings at where they are.
And there I have to say something. The whole integral, as much as I love it, an ego development theory that is obviously close to me, it is missing a huge point, namely that there are other human spirit, other ways of being human that have nothing to do with this. And in what spiral dynamics often calls early or immature cultures, there is wisdom there. There is generations and generations of knowledge. It may not be the knowledge we have, but it's sophisticated, and it's by no means early or dumb or primitive or whatever words we want to use for that. And we have to, as integralists, we have to be aware of that there is other forms of being and understanding that are certainly equal to integral.
Here.
I'm an integralist, of course, but I'm also aware of these other forms. And nowadays I'm almost more curious about them because they get eliminated, with English becoming the koine for everything. It narrows the possibility of the human spirit. It gets lost when languages get lost. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, thank you.
It's good.
I love this. And in fact, I want to jump on it now because Suzanne, I was in one of Suzanne's webinars that she led some years ago on Is English Itself a Colonizing Force? That was a magnificent webinar. English itself, that point came up during it. English itself is the result of like 4 layers of colonization, if you know English history and the history of the English language. That's why it's a very rich language. But I look at Yeah, it is a very rich language. But I want to take this back to the point I think Larry made, that these stages, each they emerge, they evolve. We don't construct them so much as we are constructed. There's a natural course of evolution, and this is one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
trace as a cultural historian, that there is a progression. Each stage, each one of those structure stages has its own, what certain capacities come online that are absolutely essential for our functioning. So we are in all the stages all the time. They are functioning in us. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. And I forget who said this. This is Suzanne again, that as we consider ourselves integralists, and we are fortunate to actually be able to objectively see these stages, we can see what is essential in each of them, what we could not function without in each of them in our own lives, what we want to cherish and preserve, and the acknowledgement that every human being has the right to be who they are, as they
Yes.
are. Our job is not to help people grow up into higher stages. Our job, right? Our job is where people are in conditions where they cannot thrive, to help them thrive, and then they can be a healthy
Mm-hmm.
version of who they
Mm-hmm.
are. And I think that's the tack. That's in my current state of ignorance. That's how I see my job as a putative integralist. Is to you, what do you need to thrive? And that's the Buddhist
Mm-hmm.
metta prayer, that you wish blessings for people and to help them if things are preventing them. And that this gets into nonviolent
Mm-hmm.
communication too. I think between integral spiral dynamics and nonviolent communication, we can save the world, as long as we kind of are aware of our own shadows and our tendencies to go out and colonize in the name of integral. So be
Mm-hmm.
aware of our own subtle tendencies to colonize too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Suzanne. This is a big, important topic, I think.
And I think the integralist perspective on what it is to save the world tends to be, often is, depending on which integralist you're listening to overlay what save the world looks like from an integral perspective onto the earlier stages. And these earlier stages have a right to be, as we know, well, as we should know. And to them, save the world means, in my understanding, save the world to them means that everybody's like them. And integrals are kind of that way. We want everybody to be like us. So that's a common dynamic between integralists and the earlier stages. Whatever we identify with, we tend to want people to be like that. Good or bad, I don't care. It just seems to be what is, or how it happens. So people at tribal purple, I spent quite a bit of time over the last few years looking at what's going to keep us out of a World War III, what's going to keep us out of a civil war. Geez, we can't even get along in America between the two sides of Republican and Democrat. They're so caught up in their silos that they can't see each other, hear each other. And those are like modern and postmodern. So, and I'm not one to rely on hope as a technique or a strategy or a means of being in the world. I try to be more nor suffering. Try to be with what I have a sense of what is. The love that I am, how can I be in that it doesn't co-opt me? So if I'm thinking of, gauging with somebody at purple, what they need from me is to identify with them. And my sense is they'll interpret that as me being like them. And they'll treat me like I'm like them. And they'll very quickly see that I'm not if we spend much time together. At which point they'll be upset. They might even feel like they've been duped. Like, Larry, I thought you were one of us. I am and I'm not. Well, what the hell does that mean? You love Allah? Well, and then whatever answer I give them wouldn't fit their box of what loving Allah looks like.
Mm.
And that's one example to bring a religion into it. So I don't want to keep rambling, but my sense is that I'm hoping this is wanting to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Larry, I was just thinking to myself how much I love how we're holding this dilemma and unfolding it in group dialogue here. I think that's fantastic. Nish, I might have cut you off. I apologize.
You're good.
That's okay. I wanted to, again, a little bit in response to the excellent point made by Suzanne, is that this is going to sound a little bit paradoxical, and I think that can't be helped, but maybe stage theory, which is what we're talking about here, is itself stage specific. Maybe it's at a particular stage of development that we see things in terms of stages. Maybe there is a later stage waiting to emerge, or is emerging, where we transcend and include stage theory itself. So we can still use stage theory as a tool, but we may no longer be limited in seeing things in terms of stages. Maybe there is a bigger picture still that's bigger than stage theory, and again, sounds paradoxical, but which emerges at a later stage. And the danger of how stage theory can make us a little bit elitist, maybe that danger is there, that it can make us think in terms of divisions between these stages, that they're primitive and we're so advanced. These kind of conceptions, misconceptions can arise. Maybe this later perspective, which will transcend and include stage theory, will find ways to unite rather than divide. It can still use these differences, distinctions, but it'll be something bigger. And one suggestion I have for what that might be, and we've all alluded to it before, is it will be the re-emergence of some kind of sacred myth. There's some kind of sacred myth waiting to emerge that will show what all of these different stages, what we now call stages, are doing in their own different ways. And that'll unite rather than divide. And the stage theory has that danger. I mean, however much valid it is, and I think it's extremely valid, has that danger to divide. Maybe the unity will be found through a sacred myth that will unite all stages. That's just a suggestion that I'm throwing out there. I'd love to know how that lands with you, Suzanne, if it does.
I think that's so beautiful. And
That is
I think it bears...
excuse me.
Sorry. It bears inquiry. These titles, like, I don't consider myself an integralist. I consider myself someone who incorporates integral theory into my body of knowledge.
Yeah.
I've always felt a little bit on the like a subculture of mine is the integral people, but I've never felt part of it because I come from a more non-dual panentheistic orientation, and it always felt incredibly clear and beautiful, but stage specific in itself, just as you said, Nish. I think that the whole concept of saving the world bears inquiry. It may in itself be a colonized orientation. Joshua Shai did his last podcast, the Emerald podcast, deals with that, the burden of salvation. And that's something that I highly recommend. It's really interesting. But a myth, a sacred myth, one that I know has propelled me, that has kind of come out of my own insight, and that definitely, I definitely feel propelled by the whole evolution of consciousness myth. I mean, for sure. I feel part of that and feel motivated to be part of that and to give myself to that. But recognizing that the divine is coming to know itself as and through us. It's coming to know itself unconditionally through all conditions, as and through us. That has been, for me, in the background of my own understanding as I look at all different appearances. You know, an understanding that has been able to keep my heart open and view things through a more compassionate lens. And recognizing that all is love, and what does not yet know itself as love. And what does not yet know itself as love is still love, coming to know itself. And shining its own appearances of darkness or confusion or whatever for attention, for the attention of our love, so that it can be embroidened and come into its true form. So these are what I would call sacred myths that have been living through me and living me. And I think that your invitation to find that is really beautiful. And I like to think that there are no, it was hard for me to recognize that as a mythos. It felt like a truth, but perhaps looking through that lens, because people love stories and I tend not to gravitate towards stories. I like to get to essences, but I recognize that people really love stories, and that I am effective as a guide, as a teacher, in the sense that I don't like to tell stories. I don't go there. I go to essences,
That's so funny. I go to truth is the master of my life. Reality. It's not a myth, it's reality. Absolute reality. There is a reality out there. And truth is the master of my life, not to just make up a myth or a story. And it will happen, but I believe there's a reality of truth. There's a reality of truth. And we can't be afraid of that. Just assert that. That would be.
So I would suggest that one way of looking at the idea of myth is not something that's opposed to reality. It's something that actually includes reality within it. So even our conception of reality is part of this bigger sacred myth that we're allowing into being. So myth doesn't necessarily mean something that's not true. Myth is actually a way of expressing truth and reality in a way that resonates, perhaps more than simple fact telling would resonate. So that's got a bigger way in which I'm trying to use the word myth here. I don't know how much that resonates with anyone.
Resonating with me a lot. As Nish and Marie know, I'm a cultural historian, and I've been steeped in integral for, gosh, over 4 decades. And as the way I am putting this together is every one of these stages of development, as cultures, what we all have in common from the beginning of our speciation as Homo sapiens with our fancy schmancy prefrontal cortexes is we see patterns and we make stories, we tell stories that make sense of those patterns. And at every stage, the specific type of story we tell, that we are able to tell, that we are able to cognize, formulate and cognize. When we were all, for the vast majority of our time as species, we were all hunter-gatherers. And what made sense to us is there is a spirit in every rock and bush and bend in the river. That was the reality. And we told stories about them. We interacted with them and with each other. And the kinds of stories we told ourselves were specific. Then when we began agriculture and we went into the era of red, we told stories about gods and goddesses. Lightning is Zeus throwing the thunder. Sickness is elves shooting arrows into me. We saw the forces of nature and our own capacities. My capacity for aggression, that's Mars, that's Aries. So we projected our own capacities and the forces of nature onto our stories of gods and gods. That's how we were understood it at that individual and collective stages. Every one of the stages has a specific mode of meaning making. And we tend to label them myths and apply the term myth to certain stages, but they're all a certain mode. And then we go into divine law handed down on stone tablets, the 10 Commandments, concrete operational thinking, right? Don't get much more concrete than 10 Commandments on stone tablets. On science, religion, reason. Science is now reason. That's how we do it. That's how we make sense of things. Force equals mass times acceleration. Wow, what a powerful way of understanding the world. And each one of those stages, I'm on my hobby horse. I'll wind this up. I promise. But each one of those gives us new capacities to deal with our lives, with each other, and the world. And there's certain trajectories that come up through. And I'm looking at, what Wilber calls second and third tier. And one of the things that's breaking through, and this loops back to some earlier phases here, is that we start to see, first we see that there have been all these stages and we have all of them in us. And we start to see through the illusion of separation. It starts to break into us as we move into second tier, how profoundly interconnected we are all the time with everything. And I know, Suzanne, in one of your seminars, webinars, I think it is actually a long ago San Diego integral thing. You pose this: how do we develop a language for that? We need new language, new concepts, because every stage has new concepts, new ways of conceiving, and they need new language and new vocabulary. And Suzanne, when you posed this at a long ago San Diego integral thing about how do we have even put into language the concept for how interconnected we are as we start to see through the separation. And I think that's our way forward. But I remember when you mentioned that, Suzanne, I thought of the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, and he would talk about how we inter-are. He said, we don't need the verb to be, we need the verb inter-be. It's not just that we are, we inter-are. So this is new territory, but every new emergent structure stage has gone through this process that we're going through now. So we'll co-invent a language and co-invent a concept, and the stories that will come up will evolve out of this. So that was my burble over and out.
And sometimes I wonder whether unlanguaging is a way out of our dilemma, because everything we do in language makes things concrete, fixes it, nails it down. So just the playful idea of unlanguaging.
And this is one of the things I love about your trajectory, because it puts reason, that's language, is binary. It's either or. This is this because it's not that. So we are going into transrational territory here, right? By translinguistic, but then how do we translate that insight back into language in a way that communicates the translinguistics, transrational? Wow.
I want to
Nish,
jump in here.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Who's
Please,
talking?
Ola. You are.
Oh, okay. So thinking about these earlier stages and the judgments we have about them, it occurs to me that there are things that transcend those judgments. Like we have reverence for the shamans, we have reverence for the artists and the brilliant thinkers, and I had more examples a while ago, but at all those different stages, the geniuses, the heroes, the storytellers, we can see the beauty in the stories of Chaucer, or just picking something out random. But so we're not completely judgmental about everything through the earlier stages. We're just judgmental about the things that we don't like, I guess. Or
Eli, that segues nicely to what Nish said before, that it's the sacred that's going to heal the divide more. And I think back to IEC a couple of times ago, and we're on the magical mystery tour. It's where 40 of us get on a bus. We tour all these sites. And this one woman in our community brought her husband. He had a Make America Great hat on. And we're like, what's he doing here? But 3 days on this bus and the experiences we had, it was amazing watching the transformation. And I'll never forget when he said, I never knew there were people like this and experiences like this. And I swear it was that big, huge singing bowl that, they used the log to pull it back and hit it while we were laying in it. We were laying in that damn bowl. It would go gong. But it was the sacred that joined us on an important element. So how do we invoke that day in and day out?
Sharing coherence and resonance.
Creating harmony. We're responding to higher harmonies. We really need to do that right now without being separate from the whole. Harmony is important. We can see it in our own life and see it in our relationships.
Something I'm very much appreciating about us, I'm noticing that though some are trying to find answers, I also feel this really strong, just wanting to inquire and try to understand better, not presuming that there are answers, but just if we continue in with the inquiry, the leaning into it, the opening into these challenges, that's a little bit more of what the answer is than providing answers. And I just appreciate you all, us all, including me, being in this space of wondering together with good intention.
No, I'm thinking as we're talking about stages of culture and evolution, that there's also stages within each individual life. And Father Richard Rohr talks a lot about the first half of life and the second half of life. And in the first half of life, most people are preoccupied with creating a self, creating a means to live, a career, a family, all those things. And it takes a lot. And in some ways, we are very privileged. I myself am definitely in the second half of my life, if not the, the smallest portion of life. And I have the privilege now. I'm not taken up with all the time that it takes to have created, sustaining myself in this culture, in this world. And I can explore other things. But, in terms of bringing other people in and young people, we've got to respect that their mission may not allow right at this moment, the capacity or the ability to spend a lot of time and energy and thought into, bigger thoughts. I think the seeds are all there. I think we all have the seeds of this, but timing is important. It's very important.
Regarding the young, my sense is, generally speaking, they're in so much overwhelm, not that adults aren't either, with what's going on in the world, what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their friends. And they're so limited, generally speaking, and how they communicate is pretty much, on the phone, with texting. And the discomfort that they have engaging in real time, face to face with somebody because it goes outside the 140 characters, for example.
Mhm.
And I feel for them. Oh my God, to be Gen Z in this world,
Mhm.
the way the adults are taking care of things, not,
Mm.
and I can appreciate why so many of them are on drugs or just on video games so much of the day. Yeah, the
Hmm.
challenges are just profound. And one of the things that has helped me, and Suzanne I know understands this, not that other people don't also, is the stage after integral, post-integral, construct aware, turquoise. There's that realizing that languaging, be it English, French, German, Spanish, whatever language, they're all constructs that have evolved over time, just people making sounds with one another. They start to take shape and get rooted in certain things, and before you know it, we have these languages that come about. And realizing that, especially around the point of English as a colonization process,
Mm.
construct aware is able to step back and look at that and go, oh yeah, it's real obvious that there's truth to that, factuality to that.
Mhm.
Not good or bad, depending on one's ethics or policies or desires, whatever, is what it is. And how to be just with all of this, these things, like Karen knows as a cultural historian, just this history of how we have compounded and compounded and compounded these ways of meaning making. And a lot of them are pretty rigid as grooves, as habituations in consciousness for humans. And can we step back from that a little bit, loosen our mental grip, construct aware, and allow ourselves to be freed up from all the so-called givens, what perceived to be givens. That's kind of scary territory in a sense because, there's no absolutes. Well, yeah, there are and there aren't, depending how you want to look at it. Well, I appreciate our journey.
It's amazing that language works at all, but somehow we understand each other to some degree.
Yeah, I was going to say. Mhm. I think it's a miracle any of this exists anyways, that we're all coming from so many different what we're really feeling and the things that have shaped who we are and how we're making sense of life today is so completely different. The fact that there's any cohesion blows my mind. Just sorry.
Larry, at IEC 2025, I walked away with the feeling of the younger generation are so far ahead of where we were.
Yeah.
Because
I
in
think
the
so too.
60s, we were just starting to play with concepts that, they've got a PhD in them. Coming out of the 50s and 60s, and I think Karen could articulate this better than me, but I'm amazed what they're starting with. There's all kinds of challenges, but I'm just amazed what they got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the
Maybe with
kids
the
are
access
okay.
to AI, it's better in that way. You can go on to check. That's an encyclopedia, maybe. In one frame.
I can just speak from my experience. I've studied all these years and gone through so many things. I'm just overwhelmed by the new that I'm hearing and the new emergences and the conversations. I can't keep up with it. Rather than trying to put something out there, I'm trying to keep up with it. That's the difference that I feel now.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and the pace of change increases at an exponential rate. And that's a pattern that goes all the way back to the Big Bang. right? In the lifetime of us baby boomers is the first time that the next major emergence of complexity in human society is happening two in the same human lifetime, and it's going to keep increasing exponentially. And so I actually posed this question at the Embodied Integral conference last April, and I looked. It was at Icon 2024. I looked around, and because somebody had just showed Ray Kurzweil's graph showing the exponential increase. I said, you youngsters here, and I looked around for them. This change is going to keep on increasing exponentially. You've got to live with this. I'm a boomer. I don't need to worry about it. But my question to you is this like holy Toledo, or is this like, let me add it? And there weren't that many of the younger generations, the audience, but their eyes just sparked, like they were ready for it. It's like, the kids are okay, like that pop song back in my youth. They're going to handle it just like we did. That's my sense.
Mm.
I was thinking of the astrophysics truth. When they used to debate, is the universe expanding or contracting? Not only is it expanding, it's accelerating as it expands. So it almost seems to be evidence of what we're going to have to do. Evolution doesn't want to wait.
Mhm.
Are we running out of energy? Is this a good place to stop for people? We'll let Nish go to bed.
Too late for that. I'm having breakfast now.
Oh, jeez.
Start his
Suzanne's
day.
up really late. Simone, are you leaving?
Bye, Simon.
Thanks for coming. So next month, hopefully we'll have something on the venue. Just watch on one of the websites. I love these conversations. They're wonderful. Who votes to have Nish and Marie back?
Mm. Oh,
All right, we're gonna have to draft you
thanks.
back. But
Thank you.
I believe they're going to be at Icon. And Suzanne's already told me she's going to be online, helping to host the online group if she can.
Mm.
So that's going to be kind of neat to do that. So a good place, Eloy, to wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marie, for all your work, Nish, for all your work and staying awake and getting this done. I think you feel the impact you made today. It was wonderful.
And thanks to our team for
Thank you.
all the work we put into it too.
Yep. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, brave
so
souls, for
good.
being on this journey.
I don't know if you heard me, but I said thank you so much.
Yes.
It was so excellent.
Thanks.
So
Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank
That
you.
means a lot. Thank you.
a level of resonance that I rarely feel within the integral framework. I really felt something beyond that here, and very much appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Good to see you again, Alan.
Good to see you, Eloy. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
All right.
Eric.
All right, I'm going to close out now. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Night.
I was going to say
Good night,
real
good
quick, Nish,
morning.
is there anything that you want to say or?
No, thank you, Eloy. Thank you for this opportunity. We'd love to come back at some point and go deeper.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to meet for 5 minutes, Marie?
Yeah.
Should we meet for
I'll
5
see
minutes?
in the other room.
On the other Zoom.
No, it's fine, Eloy.
No.
Well, I can make one
I'll
you
meet you on
host
the
and leave the
previous
room
one.
open, but if that's helpful.
Oh, no, it's okay. It'll be fine.
No,
Okay.
we'll go to the other one. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you. Thank
bye.
you. Have a beautiful rest of your evening.
Okay. All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Eloy.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the integral community.